market is this big. The LS market is this big. So the LS talking to myself. We're live. It is 8:56. I gotta do my live long and prosper here. Talking to myself about coyote markets versus LS markets. I get the coyote people yelling back and forth about how much better it is in an LS. You know, it's just all a whole security issue with people. Obviously, lots of good motors out there. Everything's great. Everything works. Everything, you can make everything better. In terms of market share, though, the coyote market's like this big and the LS market's this big. That's what I was talking to myself about. I was looking at some notes, but we're not talking about coyotes. We're not talking about LSs today. We are actually talking about the Dodge 360, my van motor. And I have been doing this for a little while now on the live feeds. We're talking about, the power gains we get from all the small, normal kinds of upgrades. Well, I'll venture. We'll start covering things like nitrous and boost and all that stuff. Coming up, and bigger motors, stroker motors, and all that stuff. But right now, I'm kind of covering what the normal range of stuff is, what the average guy is going to do. Is if he's got a 2-barrel motor and he puts a 4-barrel on it, what happens? What happens when we put a 4-barrel and a quadrajet or something on there? What is that worth? What are little, small RV cams or truck cams? What are they worth? What happens when I port the stock heads? What are long tube headers worth? Just like your back to basics kind of stuff. And that's what today is. We have another one of those. And the engine family that we're going to cover today is an LA Dodge. So it's a Dodge 360, but it also carries over to almost everything else too. But certainly the other Dodge family, it would work the same for Magnums. It would work the same for 318s or 340s. All of these different Dodge variants. So let's jump in. We'll take a look at my test motor was mid 70s van 360. So, nothing stellar. It came factory equipped with a 2-barrel intake manifold and a 2-barrel, manifold and carburetor. It had stock exhaust manifolds on it. We ran it with the exhaust the way that it was in the van. So the stock exhaust manifolds, it was a dual exhaust with, some kind of mufflers on it. I think the pipes were 2-inch. And then we ended up putting later on, we would put headers and stuff on it. But we ran it all with the stock stuff to begin with. And we'll cover when we're adding the headers on this thing. But what we did was take the motor out of the van and put it up on the engine dyno and ran it in that configuration. And we started off with stock exhaust manifolds, dual exhaust. We ran the mechanical water pump. We had the 2-barrel carburetor, 2-barrel intake manifold, stock cam, stock heads, all of that. Just a high mileage van, basically the way that I was driving it around when we were driving it in the van. And run on the engine dyno, it did, as you might imagine, did very stellar. In fact, it made similar power to the small block that I ran with the 2-barrel carburetor on there, not surprisingly. One's a 350, one's a 360. The 360 had less compression than the 350 did because we had put a flat top piston in that 350. But run in that configuration in stock 2-barrel guys for the Dodge 360, it made a whopping 200. And this is flywheel horsepower, not wheel horsepower, because we ran it on the engine dyno. So it made a whopping 225 horsepower and 338 foot-pounds of torque. So what we did first was we ran it with the stock air cleaner on it also. So what we did was we took the air cleaner off, and oddly enough, the air cleaner was somewhat restrictive, I guess. It picked up power to 231 horsepower and 243 foot-pounds. So if 5 or 6 horsepower here and there, not a ton, and the gains were actually. There were gains kind of all the way through the curve. But again, we're talking about not very much power here. So the first step up we did where we gained a significant amount of what I would call a significant amount of power was we replaced the factory 2-barrel carburetor and intake manifold with a factory cast iron 4-barrel intake manifold. And then we ran a Q-jet with it. I think that this motor originally came with a thermal quad. I'm not sure why we didn't run the thermal quad on there. But we ran the quadrajet, and it did very well. And just like it did with the small block Chevy, when we went from the 2-barrel to the 4-barrel, we picked up a pretty good amount of power. So if you guys want to go ahead and guess how much power we picked up going from the 2-barrel to the 4-barrel, let me know in the comments how much you think. And even if you're watching this video later on, if you don't peek ahead, you can take a guess and let me know before you continue on and continue watching the video. You can make a guess on how much power we picked up. But here we go. The 4-barrel combination, going from the 2-barrel to the 4-barrel, it went from 231 horsepower and 343 foot-pounds to 264 horsepower. So we picked up 33 horsepower, going from the 2-barrel to the 4-barrel, 357 foot-pounds of torque, so 14 foot-pounds at the peak. And like it did with the small block Chevy, we didn't lose power anywhere. And in this case, on the Dodge, we loaded this thing all the way down at 2,000 RPM. So the 4-barrel combination made as much torque down low at 2,000 RPM as the 2-barrel combination did. That's often a misconception on people thinking, oh, well, the 2-barrel is going to make, it's velocity and it's going to make more low-speed power. Well, the 4-barrel works just fine there too. And the Quadrajet was good. The air fuel was good on it. And it made as much power as the 2-barrel up to 26 or 700 RPM, a couple more, 2 or 3 more actually. But from 2,700 or so, then it started picking up a good bit of power. I mean, we're talking about, let's see, 4,000 RPM, 287. Yeah, we're talking about like 45 foot-pounds there. So a good bit, because all of this stuff happened below 5,000 RPM. It made peak power like 4,800 RPM. So it was not a real high RPM piece yet, because it still had the factory cam in, the factory cylinder head on. And so what we did then is we did change both of those, just like we did with that small block. I had a set of mildly ported stock heads, just replacements from the heads that were on that Dodge van. We did a valve job on it, did some minor bowl work and stuff, and then also put a small comp 252 camshaft in it. Again, a small cam in it. That's probably like a 206 or something like that. Let's see if I can look that up really quick. I should have prepped beforehand, right? Yeah, so 252. It's actually a 250 cam. So it was a 206, 212, 432, 444, 110. So pretty small. In fact, it was the smallest extreme energy offering that they had. And so with the mildly ported head and the small cam upgrade, I take that back. Before we get to that, we put long tube headers on it. This is where we stepped up to the long tube headers. This whole time we had been running the stock exhaust manifold. So we installed long tube headers. So let me know in the comments, what do you guys think that the headers are worth? How much power are the headers worth at this power level, going from the stock exhaust manifolds to the long tube headers? And the headers were worth a pretty good bit of power. And we go over this every time. Long tube headers make more low speed power than stock exhaust manifolds do. Stock exhaust manifolds and shorty headers do not add low speed power. Long tube headers add low speed power. In fact, they added power everywhere from 2,000 all the way out to 5,000. In fact, to give you an idea about low speed power, the headers at 2,500 334 added 30 foot-pounds of torque. So that's what long tube headers do. That's the scavenging effect, the primary length, all of that's working together. But with the long tube headers, it went from 264 horsepower to 277 horsepower. And torque went from 357 foot-pounds to 373 foot-pounds. So the long tube headers helped quite a bit. That was a good upgrade. So now we can get to our camshaft. Then we put in the small 250 cam and the mildly ported with the valve job stock heads. So now how much are we gaining from going to the stock heads and camshaft to the 250 cam and ported heads? We went from 277 horsepower up to 339 horsepower. So it picked up quite a bit. So 62 horsepower from the mildly ported stock heads and small camshaft. Torque went from 373 foot-pounds to over 400 foot-pounds, 414 foot-pounds of torque. So now we're making pretty good, pretty reasonable power. Now we had a, mildly ported head, a very small camshaft, and then a 4-barrel intake manifold setup. And so now this thing was actually doing pretty well. It was up near 400 foot-pounds, even at 2,500 foot-pounds of torque. It was at 387 foot-pounds. So it did pretty well. What we did then was replace the factory cast iron 4-barrel manifold and quadrajet with an air gap, an Edelbrock air gap, our RPM air gap intake manifold, and then a 650 Demon carburetor. So any idea any ideas, any guesses on what the gain is for that? Or did it gain? It actually did gain a little bit of peak power, 343 horsepower versus 339. But torque was up quite a bit, from 414 foot-pounds to 428 foot-pounds. It gained a lot through the middle part of the curve with the air gap. I was surprised. I would have thought that the air gap would have made more power than the quadrajet and the factory manifold. But at this power level, it gained mostly torque in the middle part of the curve. So the next thing was, and this will be a good question for you guys. The next thing we did was replace those mildly ported stock heads with a set of Edelbrock aluminum heads for the 360. So we put on, we went from cast iron heads to Edelbrock heads. They flowed a lot. Obviously, they should work a lot better than a factory, any of the factory head, even our mildly ported one, because all they did was a little bit of bowl work, and they did a fresh valve job and stuff and a surface just to make sure that the stock head went on. But we installed the Edelbrock heads, and then what do you guys think happened when we did the Edelbrock heads? There was exactly this much power, unfortunately. 343 horsepower and 428 foot-pounds. Almost, and I'm going to take a look at the curve and see. I think that there might have been a little bit of a change in the curve, but the peak numbers were exactly the same. Yeah, it was almost identical when we put the Edelbrock heads on. They weren't a big change. The next thing that we did after running the Edelbrock heads is we replaced the factory rocker setup with roller rockers, and that actually yielded some pretty good power. We went from 343 horsepower and 428 foot-pounds to 354 horsepower and 428 foot-pounds, and the rockers were worth power kind of at the top of the RPM range. They started gaining power above 4,000 and then gained power all the way out to 5,000. So we were picking up, let's see here. I think the greatest gain from the rocker was all 16 or 17 horsepower out at the top. But at the peak, because the peak is happening earlier here, they showed good gains, like I said, out at the top. The final test was we ran a 268 camshaft. So we stepped up from the 250 cam to, that should be a 224. Yeah, 224, 230. 477, 480 lift, and still a 110 LSA. Put in a bigger, that would be more like a performance kind of street cam. And that picked up a pretty good bit of power. It pushed power up from 354 to 386. And peak torque was up as well, 400 to 434 foot-pounds. Not a huge gain in the peak torque, but from 3,800 on out, it just picked up a lot of power and carried it all the way out. We only ran this thing to like 5,600 RPM, which is kind of, it was making peak power just shy of that. But now we were making, 386 horsepower and 434 foot-pounds of torque. This thing probably would have been with a motor that didn't have a million miles on it, probably could have been a 400 horsepower motor. But we were real happy with the torque output. The Dodge being 10 cubic inches bigger than a small block Chevy, it made good torque. But I did one interesting test that I wanted to tell you about while we had this thing on the dyno, and that was the exhaust test. And we've done this before on other combinations where we run the headers and then we run it with a collector extension. So we ran the headers, just open headers. And then we essentially changed the collector extension. In our case, we just took the muffler off which acts as an extension. It's not a magic muffler. The muffler doesn't produce any sort of weird reflected wave that adds in tuning. It's just an extension length. And what it did was, and we see this kind of result time and time again when we change that collector extension. What it did is it had no effect on power from 3,400 RPM all the way out to 5,600 RPM. Power was exactly the same. But below that, when we took the muffler off, it lost as much as 50 foot-pounds of torque. So at 3,100, the torque output dropped from 395 to 348 foot-pounds of torque. So it had a huge drop in torque below 3,400. In fact, from 2,500, which is where we started the run on this one, from 2,500 to 3,400, it lost a ton of torque. Like I said, 50 foot-pounds there at 3,100. And you would definitely notice that. And so if you just ran, some of these guys that run at the drag strip just run with open headers, just put a little collector extension on and you will pick up, that's all like 60 foot time there. Or if you don't have traction, you could take that off and then take traction or take power away so that you could maybe add traction. But that was an interesting test. That was a big change in power. That was a huge drop in power in that RPM range just from an exhaust test. And excuse me, and all we did was change a little section of pipe about this long. It's 50 foot-pounds would be the best money that you ever spent on a 2-foot piece of pipe. It was pretty big power, but that was a fun test with the Dodge. Again, like the others that I've done where I got to test a lot of different things. This one actually happened over a couple of days because it took a lot of time to get everything worked out because I hadn't ever done a Dodge. So we had to make sure there were a few runs to the auto parts store to get gaskets and things like that. So we had to do a lot of things to get the EDELBROCK head set up with the right push rod length and stuff to get all that working. But it worked out very well. And I've seen, and after talking to Dulcich about those on the EDELBROCK heads, he's seen similar things too, where they just didn't gain much, especially over any kind of, mildly ported stock head. He said, but once you port the EDELBROCK heads, he said, then they really wake up. And he's done some good work on ported versions of that heads. And I would much rather have aluminum EDELBROCK heads on there than I would iron heads. But for the average guy, they know that you don't really need to spend the money on that kind of cylinder head if you're doing stuff in this mild, power output range. And even just surfacing in a valve job and doing some minor bowl work and stuff on your stock heads can get some, fairly good gains, especially if you team it with the right kind of camshaft. So we'll see what you guys got going on this morning. Got to get out of Dodge. There you go. Watching from PA. Okay, do I need to do more Mopar dyno testing? Let me know on our polio. Good morning. Not going racing, $200 entry fee. It's not ready for that level of racing. I'll dyno it instead. There you go. Got an old late 70s Interceptor 360 with the big heads and high rise. Cool. Place the Interceptor. My top end is unlimited. 30 horsepower, 41 horsepower. Good morning, good morning, good morning. All kinds of power upgrades. Todd, what's going on, man? Yo, mama. That's good. I like that. I'd be extremely happy if I made 250 wheel horsepower at 10 PSI. That probably mass out for the NA power output of that motor, right? Did you ever set that thing up to run it NA turbo center? Some higher compression pistons. Yeah, I can't remember now. I'll have to look back at the photos on this thing and see if, let's see. No, that's Holly. I'll see if I can, the header test was really, the extension test was really cool. I'll see if I have a photo of my Ford, of the Dodge, with the pistons exposed. I don't remember if I do. Do I have any? turbo van or van outs. Yeah, I don't have any photos of the exposed pistons, just like rocker photos. Yeah, that exhaust is really funny, funky looking. It looked all fancy once I had the EDELBROCK heads and the better valve covers and the MSD on there and the dual plane intake and good carburetor on there, because when I first ran it, it was not very good looking. Let's see, a GT45 now. That's right. It does need boost, right? Before that, though, the 5.9 Magnum needs boost. The air doesn't care what the ports and passages are made of. The scale that does, though. That's right. Just wondering why the final chassis dyno, the modded 360, lost horsepower under 3,000 RPM over stock. But on the engine dyno, it had a good gain over stock under 3,000. I don't know. Was it a converter issue or something? Have you ever tested the exhaust theory with mufflers that bolted onto the collector? These did. That's what this was. It had a, I think it had I think we bolted the muffler right onto the exhaust, if I remember correctly. Yes, let's see. Yeah, actually the muffler was attached to the collector extension, so it was longer than I thought. I thought that the muffler went right onto the collector, but it didn't. There was a collector extension and muffler. But we have tested on the LS. We have a muffler that bolts right onto that flange, and actually it slid onto that flange because it was a slip fit deal, and it does the same thing. So we have tested it with just a muffler. I haven't done it with whatever specific muffler you're asking about there, but it's primarily the length that's the issue. Aluminum definitely is easier to port, Dan. Ran 1330s at 100 with a stock 308 head. Put on Speedmaster heads, went 1266 at 108. From 100 to 108, did you just change the heads in? Was the only change? 8/10 seems like a lot. Yeah, I have a 360 Magnum. I have other people's stock dynos, 136 wheel horsepower, hot air intake and header. Okay. Yeah, I would think that 10 pounds. What does that calculate out to? 136 times 1.69. Yeah, that calculates to 230 at the tire. But maybe with the 85 a little more. Do some AMC testing. I agree. I was thinking about that when I woke up this morning. I'm like, you know what? I need to do some AMC testing. What's the cheapest mod per dollar for the Dodge Magnum? Nitrous probably is. And then a camshaft and then turbo would also be cheap. Scott, is that a D-stroke 360? Dropped 1.5 points of compression. Okay, that would definitely make it have a short runner intake. I cleaned up the valve area. Okay, so you'll lose power from the compression. You're going to gain power up top from the short runner intake, and bulwark should help. 360 smog heads are a pretty good factory head. They can get pretty good mileage too. A 300 Magnum. That would even be a more D-stroked, right? A D-stroke 318. Working on a 360 Jeep. Change only the heads, and the rest was exactly the same. 750 EDELBROCK carb. Did pick up compression from the open chamber stockers. Yeah, so you got a change in compression and a change in head flow. That's cool. That's a good gain, man. That's obviously a win. And also at the drag strip, you're also changing weight of the vehicle too. was talking about the 360 engine versus chassis. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I just don't. I have to go back and look and see if I can figure out what the thing was. I'll have to see what the change in configuration was. Gonna get another 22 Magnum. Hoping for 145 wheel horsepower NA. Also running M1, so it will help a little bit. Oh yeah, that might help. I wonder how much the M1 helps on the NA motor. Ford versus Chrysler versus AMC 360 shootout. What Ford 360 would you run? The FE motor? Looking back at the FE stuff, they had some pretty stout factory FE stuff. Pretty stout 352 and 360 stuff. Did you ever feel like I offer next and nothing to the conversation? I'd rather have an AMC and a Jeep and make it a real Jeep. Yeah. I'm liking that. I'm liking that. I've always wanted a pacer. And a 6-cylinder pacer. How's your poll doing? Do I need to do more Mopar testing? Really, 21% of you are saying no? Wow. The hate is strong on the Mopar. I have a 460 Ford in a RV. Yes, 460s. There's lots of power stuff for 460s. We got a Pacer's blue with a straight 6 to the Mirthmobile. And you got to be playing Queen in the background. AMC versus a Buick Nailhead. That would be one that's probably not been done yet. Dream Jeep is a 4-liter 6 manual. Two-door Cherokee. Cherokee people. I've got a 360 AMC and my Grand Wagoneer. Uses a lot of gas. I'd like to do a 401, but a 360 would also be work. I probably could find those in wrecking yards, I would imagine. I don't know that I've ever searched around for a in the Grand Wagoneer area. 99 two-door, 31,000 miles on it. That's not very many miles. So it's heavy and aerodynamic. That's good, Scott. 42 million GVW. That's a lot. That hardly even fits on the plate. But at least it's a 360 instead of a 350 like the small block Chevys. You got more. You got 10 more. So Dodge guys can always say that they have more. And the same thing with the 318. Well, I guess versus a 302 Ford, it would be better. Then you're putting a 58 Ford pickup body on a 68 frame. Are all the dimensions the same? Just putting the 68 body on a 2-wheel drive frame. 42 is the meaning of life. Are you a Jackie Robinson fan? Barry, you want a 383 Dodge? Is that what you're talking about? Or are you responding to the Chevy stuff? Because they didn't ever make a 383 from the factory. That's not OEM, man. That's not OEM. That's not OE. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, yeah. Great book. Terrible movie, though. 1,200 miles a year. Yeah, that's not very much. It's 100 miles a month. My stock L96 has 400,000 miles on it. I know. Nice. Well, TK, you've amortized that motor. Obviously, you've definitely got your money's worth. That's a lot of miles for a 15. Thanks for all the fish. You need to read a book. Last one was the Phantom Toll Booth. That's a good one, though, right? That's definitely a good read. The ones that I told my sons to read was the Phantom Toll Booth, which I think I read to them, and then all the other ones when they were little kids, like Fish is Fish and Frederick and all these things. Good Night Moon, I guess. But the Phantom Toll Booth, Call It Courage, Call of the Wild. What else? There were some other ones too. Aaron, what's going on? That's right. You almost missed the Mopar talk. You got to go back to the beginning I mean, you've seen it already, all the Dodge 360 stuff that I did. Where the Wild Things Are. Yeah, that's good. That's a short book, but it's good. James and the Giant Peach. We did watch that movie. I don't think we read that book, though. Have you tested Speedmaster billet aluminum roller rockers on a Mopar? I don't think I'm trying to think whose rockers these were that we ran. I'm sure that they were comps, probably. I don't think this is a while back. I haven't run the Speedmaster ones. Since you have my set of manifolds, you want me to fab up a crossover tube for the GT45? No, that's not necessary. We can easily do that. Managing Oneself by Peter Drucker. I haven't heard of that. If you bring the Mopar back, I'm definitely going to bring the 5.9 Magnum. We're going to do some more testing with it. I still have the stock Keglet on deal. I just need to get off my rear and get the springs for it and put it back together. I also have to do the piston flip. I have to flip them back into their correct position. Oh, you need a Y pipe? Oh, do I want to fab you up a crossover tube for a GT45? Yeah, but it's not going to work in a vehicle probably. .318, my RAM has 342,000 on it. No issues. Nice. How to win friends and influence people. Yeah, I've heard of that. I still haven't mastered that. Just getting up late. Having my morning anti-zombie coffee. Is that what keeps the zombies away, or just keeps you prepared if they decide to attack? It's all about being a prepper, right? Have any of the aftermarket EFI companies started to offer VVT control for the LS? I don't know. I don't know if any of their things will run VVT. Limitless expended edition? Not extended? How to speed read and retain everything? That would be good. I could have used that. I was a pretty avid reader growing up. I wish I still had LA interceptor heads. Taylor, what's going on, man? Nice of you to show up. We've been here talking about you the whole time. I've never read How to Win Friends. Yeah. Richard, I know you did a Gen 3 Hemi testing, but do you have anything planned for 6.4, guys? Yeah, Brian's going to be doing, and I'm going to go back there during the testing. They're doing a bunch of cams for the later 6.4 stuff. Do they control cam timing on Fords? Yes, they do that. And at least I think they do. I think that the Holly does that. When we ran the Coyote, we ran it with a factory ECU and harness and stuff, and then did it that way. Samuel, I think that the roller rockers were the same ratio. Some of these LS overhead cam motors are looking pretty sweet. Oh yeah, Taylor, exactly right. It has to be. It's nothing but good stuff. We can say whatever we want now because you work here. I can't remember that rabbi's name. Okay. 68,318. My wife's been reading a bunch of books too that she's recommended me. I think I'll look at a couple of them. Mel, 68,318 D200. What induction does it have on it right now? If it has a 2-barrel, obviously 4-barrel definitely the way to go. If it has a factory 4-barrel setup, that's pretty good. I don't think I'd recommend go. An aluminum one's good because it's lighter weight, and maybe some heat dissipation or something there. But it didn't show big gains on it, so I don't know if I would do that. Camshaft definitely. Limitless Expanded Edition. Okay. Yeah, that would be pretty funny, right, Scott? If everybody had gift cards. Yep, Andy, I will hook you up. You'll get exactly what all the other guys got. In fact, you're going to get twice as much as the other guys got. Which is, what's 2 times nothing? Can anybody do the math for me? So somebody asked me about a camshaft for a 5.3. What do you think I told them? I also read all of the I read all the Tolkien stuff. I actually read all of the Star Wars books, including stuff that they never made into movies, because there's a whole Star Wars universe that people wrote books on. Timothy Zahn, I think, or something was one of them, and Kevin somebody or other also wrote a bunch of them. Both of them were really good, and they go expand use that universe and have other stories that are generated around that stuff that's not relevant to the to what the existing storyline is, but it's really good stuff. That the writers were amazing. Today's International Women's Day. I'm going to have to take my wife out, which we wanted to go out anyway. Todd, don't push yourself too much. Yes, Dan, it was a Truck Norris scam. See, Turbo Centro knows how to say the right things. I feel like the information you give is the gift card, and it's the gift that keeps on giving. Is there any difference in the 4.8 versus 5.3 block? No, they're the same. The blocks are interchangeable. In fact, it says 4.8/5.3 on the block, and they're interchangeable. I just got streaming service. There are all kinds of Star Wars related movies. Yeah, a lot of them, in my opinion, are not worth watching. All the Jar Jar Binks stuff is not. That's not my kind of thing. Definitely scan. Not watch any more Star Wars movies anymore. Is there? Yeah, Rogue One was good. There were a couple of others later ones that I liked, but that whole prequel stuff was not that good. Mandalorian is good though. I did like that. I liked Baby Yoda was awesome. I love when he was eating all the frog people eggs. That's awesome. My wife was like, I can't believe he's doing that. How do you tell a 4.8 from 5.3? Yeah, you gotta check the stroke. If you can take the pan off, you can look at the casting numbers on the crank and the rods, because both of those are different. Andy, make her take you out and treat you right. You know, dinner, dancing, drinks. Oh, John Wick movies. I've watched all of those. Yeah, I took my sons to see those. I love. I think it's the third one when they're in the third one, the second one when they're in the museum with all of the weapons in it, and they just start throwing about 20. They're throwing knives back and forth at each other, and the axe and stuff. My sons and I are just laughing like, oh my god, that's so many knives. Four Seasons of the Rifleman. My mother-in-law just gave me a bunch of episodes of Yellowstone, which I haven't seen. I haven't seen all the Yellowstone stuff. Once I got old, I stopped having time for fiction. Yeah, Scott, I agree about Halle Berry. Tucker and Dale versus Evil, and I like the Evil Dead. All the Evil Dead stuff is good. Richard, what would cause me to have a whole lot of blow by? Rings not sealing. I only watch old movies with cars in them. California Kid, Corvette Summer, Funny Car Summer, American Graffiti, Vanishing Point, 130,000 is a ring gap, at least, right? King of the Mountain, yes. Moment of silence for the speedster. It's awesome. No, I believe you, Scott. I'm still saying it's still too much, even if you measured it. 83% are saying more Mopa. Army of Darkness, I know. Come on, baby, give me some sugar. What is it you need for the Magnum still? I sold off the rest of my stuff when I bought the Hemi parts. So my miscellaneous Magnum stuff is sitting here. I think all I need is springs, because I have a cam for it that I could put in there. And I have all the factory stuff. I just need to put head gaskets back on it. And I mean, you need to flip the pistons back over, put head gaskets back on it, put springs in the heads, and then do the cam test. Do the stock cam versus the UT Awesome camshaft, which I feel bad that I've been so long since I ran that thing. About to start The Sopranos. You know what I was telling my wife last night? We were looking through the channels, and The Godfather came on. I've never seen The Godfather. She's like, you have never seen The Godfather? I'm like, I know. I feel like I'm letting everybody down, but I do need to watch it though. I've already found a few DK snakes. Nice. Little brown snakes. Calm and fun. Yeah, those are cool. Space truckers, proper oil temperature range. Oil temperature range should be close to water temperature. Richard, with the potential for performance is more elevated on the distributor or distributorless engine? Really, in the range that we're talking about, The distributor has no effect on that. What you can get into for high RPM stuff or really high boosted stuff, just making sure that you have enough spark energy. But we've done 1,000 horsepower stuff with distributors and ignition amplifiers, so that will also work. Yeah, Danny, that's not me putting ads in the live feed because YouTube does that, but that helps me, right? Do the higher mileage 5.3 pistons show less skirt wear than 4.8 due to stroke angle lateral load? I was watching some videos that said some designs really benefit from a longer stroke. I honestly, given the amount of design and engineering that the OEMs do, it would be interesting to try to measure that, but I don't think you'll see that in the design and RPM range that we're running these motors in. I don't think you'll see a side loading problem. Aaron, I don't remember what the cam is. It's something small. Andy, I wouldn't think that the cranks are interchangeable because the piston and rod assemblies are not the same. After 10 minutes of running it was 90 and full of condensation. The oil is full of condensation? What is the water temperature? Mopar, Novofar. Mopars are the thing, especially the 2.2 turbo. Shout out to the Car Farm guys. Maybe these you just need a set of 2.2 retainers. The retainers for the 2.2 are the same as the Magnum. A lot of older bikes I restore have a ton of condensation in the oil on the first run. Is that from initial startup or something? We see condensation when we run in the motors on the dyno, when we run them at low water temperatures. The other thing I want to try in the engine dyno that I don't ever do is I want to run the steam crossovers and just at least get all of the air out of it. But we don't ever do that. We just plug the crossovers. Turbo Daytona Z's, yep. Water was 180, oil was 90. I think that your Turbo Center, I think that your oil measurement temperature is wrong. I don't know how the oil can be that cold. There's got to be something going wrong with where you're measuring it or how you're measuring it. Because there's no way that the water temperature, if the motor is up to temperature, the oil is going to be that temperature. The oil, there's no additional cooling for the oil that would allow it to run that cold. Yeah, they're larger than these require. It came on the Mopar RT heads. Yeah, I'll just get the ones from Hughes or whatever you recommended. I was wondering the other day about part throttle dyno runs. Would it tell something about efficiency? No, because the load is completely different. I did some testing on half throttle or three-quarter throttle. That video is up, but again, it's a stationary load, and then the dyno is controlling the rate of acceleration. So the part throttle stuff in the vehicle is the rate of acceleration at part throttle is controlling it differently. Scott, no, all that's good, man. Freedom of religion is a hallmark of the United States. Not sure it's when we run them on the old oil for the first time in years. It can sometimes be bad, so it looks like a milkshake, but then one proper heat cycle. Well, and if you have a little bit of water in the oil, if you get the motor up to temperature and all of a sudden the oil is 200 degrees or more, it actually gets all of the water out of the oil. I'd like to take a modern Dart 1.4 liter turbo and put it in an Omni. Yeah. Charlie, I don't really know what your question is. Dodge is making an inline 6-cylinder. They are. It was the pan temperature. Yeah, it's not an external temperature you're taking, right? But yeah, I don't. We've never seen that. So we've done lots of testing with water temperature and oil temperature, and even when we run the water temperature at 140 degrees. If we make a couple of runs on the dyno, the oil temperature will still be in the 220s. And the oil temperature will always be as hot or hotter than the water temperature. Yeah, Scott, that is important. You got to get the, but we don't we don't do that running 130 or 140 degrees. That's not up to operating temperature, really. We normally make it. I normally have it run hotter when we're doing a break-in cycle, though. I saw a kid, a Coyote guy, posting about he doesn't break in his motors. He just puts them together right and then runs them. Just put it on the chassis dyno and start making full throttle pulls. I'm like, yeah, you can do that. You haven't broken the motor in though. And just because he's like, well, yeah, it works because I put it together right. I'm like, you should put the motor together right anyway. It should have the right bearing clearances. It should have the right ring gap. It should have the right piston to wall. It should have all of those things. But that still doesn't stop the break-in procedure from working. It's just about being impatient. And if you run the motor under power and stuff, it will work. But if it's a drag race motor and you're replacing everything, after whatever number of pulls you have or number of cycles you have or one season or part of a season or whatever, and you're rebuilding it, you don't care that it lasts, that the ring's seated properly and it lasts 150 or 200 or 300,000 miles. You don't care about that. It's like a top fuel motor. They just put them together and they run it. Yeah, but they're going to take it apart the next round. So that's a different kind of thing. But the confusion for not being patient and putting it together correctly is kind of funny. I've had stuck open thermostats that made oil milky from moisture, not evaporation. Yeah, turbo sensor. Yeah, I would check and see. I'll bet you, because if you put your hand on 90-degree oil, it just feels warm. But if it's closer to 200, it's not good. Only another 2 weeks of winter. Some of us never have the time to do everything we should, but we always have time to do it again and again and again. That's right. There's never time to do it right, but there's always time to do it twice. These are the P524964 springs, 620 or 525 lift. Should put another pole up. Will a 475 big block Chevy with an Edelbrock air gap make 485 horsepower? Why should that be another pole? That's oddly specific. And I already know that it will because I already did that. And I don't think mine was 475 inches. Do I need to do more Mopar dyno testing? 81% saying yes. Bunty, what's going on? Got a few more minutes here. I'll close out our poll at 81%. It's oddly specific, I know. 3rd gen Hemi Big Bang. I'd done that once. It was warmish on the stick. I don't know why I don't know why, but I also don't know how it could be if the water temperature is that hot, unless the water temperature is not that hot. Well, one of the two things is not correct. One of these things is not like the other one. You know, we all know the song, right? You can smell when an engine's hot. Yeah. And we go in and do we just do a quick tap on the cylinder head too. Like, oh yeah, that's a temperature. Oh wait, that's not a temperature. Because we have in the past, for one reason or another, run motors and not turned the water pump on, not filled the motor, and idled it or went to break it in or whatever. When you then turn the water on and start filling it, and it shows you that it's unhappy by immediately boiling the water. I've read a bunch of anecdotal evidence on forums about running a different thermostat in the 8.1s, helping them stop burning oil. So which way are they going? Are they running it hotter to have it stop burning oil? I'd like to see a 307 with power pack heads and a solid cam. What do power pack heads flow? 180 CFM or something? Do they even flow that much? 307 can make 500 horsepower with a big cam and compression and good heads and a single plane intake manifold. I'd like to see that. I saw a video with a car that had a compartment releasing steam. High horsepower Cadillac supercharged. What was that? Just curious. When they ran the dyno pull, you could see steam coming from the opening on the top. Was that the crankcase system going up to a breather? YouTube. I don't know what is it you're asking me to go look at. A 307. What's the bore size on the 307? I can't remember. Oh, 38750. Oh, so it's a 307's like a de-stroked 305 kind of. So it's a little bit bigger bore, right? So 3900. So would that give you a little bit more ability to put heads on it than a 305? .327 crank and a 283 bore. Yeah, the motors do that. If you give them enough head flow and enough camshaft and enough compression and enough induction system, then they make power. Probably not with power pack heads, right? Oh, you get the key is to get the right LSA. Yeah, the 305 is kind of limiting in the available heads, but there would be cylinder heads for the 305, like those trick flow heads. I'm sure you could get those things to flow above 250 CFM, even the small ones. Thinking of Todd, you're thinking of investing in Bitcoin. You're watching it climb 8.7% in 2 days. That's a pretty good return, right? That's right, Scott. You got to flip the pistons. Rather have a 307 than a 305. That's right, because you got that short stroke and the big bore that makes all the power. Will I've never tried to run. I had a friend that had a 307 back in the day, but I've never measured to see if bigger heads will fit on the 307 bore. I mean, I suppose you could always notch the top of the bore if you had to. Oh, semiconductors are the big thing. My guy told me to be in semiconductors like 2 years ago, and I didn't do it. I'm kicking myself. How do you come up with the topics? I have a lot of dyno testing that I can look at. Maybe 350, 327 heads will fit on a 307. That's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if maybe a 194 valve, airflow research head or something like that would fit on there. Are an 8.1 block and the 6-liter iron block similar in weight? Do they make a 6.2 iron block? I know they make 6-liter iron blocks, but are all 6.2s aluminum? But I don't have any idea about the block weights on those. I would imagine that the 8.1 is still going to weigh more. I'll buy a gauge for the oil temp. Yeah, let me know. One more minute. Vortex. I don't know. That's what I'm wondering. A Vortex might fit on a 307. Uh-oh. Dragon Ball Z. A moment of silence. Vortex on a 307. Well, they have 305 Vortex heads, right? So you could put those on, but... And on that note, it is time to go. But I'll be back tonight, so there's good news. I still haven't picked my topic for tonight, but I have lots of dyno results to talk about. There's nothing better to talk about, right? I'll see you guys all tonight. Puppy, puppy, puppy. Doggies.